Hi, chillers. Just a trigger warning for today before we get started on the episode. The topic that we're going to be doing focuses around suicide. So I wanted to provide a resource for anyone who is in need. You can call or text 988 on your phones and also visit 988lifeline.org where a live chat is available, as well as American Sign Language interpretation if needed. Take good care of yourselves.
You're listening to Chillworthy,
A podcast where two best friends discuss mysteries, murders, and anything in between for your enjoyment.
So if you're ready to hear some chilling and unsettling cases, you're in the right place. Happy listening. Hi chillers, welcome back to part 2 of Japan's Suicide Forest. Thank you for joining us again, and we are going to jump right in. So the forest natural characteristics play a big role because there's just such a sense of isolation and quietness that some people might find like almost comforting. You know, I mean, it is a beautiful place. Right. So the eerie stillness has been reported to heighten the feelings of those who might be in despair because it like promotes that they're even more isolated. Right. You know, like now they're not only isolated on how they're feeling, but physically they are completely isolated from other people.
Right.
One of the most haunting features about this forest is that people, and this is something that's always stood out to me, people come across these bright colored like strings or like not police tape, but like it's like on a big roll. Have you ever heard of this?
To try to find them?
Sort of. I mean, sort of. So the people who are contemplating suicide but not completely committed to it, when they get there and they want to go off the path, they will pick a tree and tie it around the tree, and then they just walk into the forest as deep as they want. And so, you know, there's obviously like hundreds of yards of tape and string or whatever. So like it's for the people who don't want to get lost in case they do not commit suicide. However, the thing is, if they do commit suicide, then yes, these are literal
links,
like a line to that. And so a lot of the times when these forest workers, if you come across a string or a tape, wherever it started from, you either are going to find an abandoned campsite at the end of it, a person who's just still camping, quote unquote, there. And again, you can always use the excuse, oh, well, I didn't want to get lost. Like, yeah, I'm camping out here. I had to put the tape up. I don't want to get lost. Like, it's very ambiguous, right? Like, unless you are literally actively committing suicide, how are they going to prove you're trying to do that?
Right.
So, or unfortunately, you would come across a body. And I think one of the most popular ways of people killing themselves in this forest is hanging, I want to say. Anyway, but yeah, so that's what when you see this ribbon or tape, like that must be very eerie, especially if you're just out there trying to hike and you might notice off in the distance like a bright, yellow piece of tape that just goes off into the woods. Like that's pretty eerie to me.
Well,
one might say Chillworthy.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I don't know how you can go there responsibly. Like, I know you're saying that's not, totally what this place is about, and people go there to enjoy themselves with no intention of harming themselves. But I don't know how you can, like, morally go here just for a nice afternoon hike without being ready to try to intervene. Like, if you're hiking and you come across one of these spools, how can you keep walking and not go? And maybe you're going to go off, I mean, hopefully not hours until you find the end of it. But you know what I mean? Like, how can you not follow
Well, I think the only distinction is the spools don't start on the main path.
Oh, I thought they do.
So they'll start a little ways off of the main path is what I'm saying. Like, because I don't think these people either want to draw attention to themselves in that way. So like they will be on it. That's why I keep saying like people hike there on a regular basis, because if you're just there sticking to the paths that are not chained off, people aren't going to be setting up tents there from what I learned. People aren't putting up tape right from the main path. It'll be one of the offshoot paths. So again, unless you make the determination that you're going to go off the beaten path, even though this is still another path you're taking, but you kind of have to pass like through chains and stuff to get onto it. So then I think the mentality becomes a little different. But if you're just on that main path, the percentage of you coming across that is a lot lower than if you stray off that path.
Yeah.
But which, I mean, obviously makes sense then, but why they have so many volunteers and stuff, because they do have to go off the main path and then start looking for signs of string, tape, campsites, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, and like I said, the people, maybe they didn't commit to it, so then they can find their way back. So, and there's no telling how many people actually left a string of rope, didn't do it, and then just took the string back with them. Like, who knows how many people
Very true.
did that. Because I actually was wondering how they came up with, like, how do you know in 2010 there were 247 attempts? Like, are people... I don't think people are reporting that, though.
Right. Well, maybe it's like a culmination of people who go and seek help when they get back, and they report that, and then that is somehow provided to some... I don't know who's keeping track of those statistics. If they have these volunteers or government officials that are waiting at the exit, if there's only one way to exit the forest.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think there are multiple ways.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know. But that makes me think, like, I'm sure as high as that number is, I feel like it's probably underreported.
Oh, I would say so too. But
right.
Then we have another, like, very eerie aspect to this, is that obviously the people who do decide, I guess not, it doesn't technically mean that they did commit suicide, but I would say the large majority of these people, when they have committed suicide, like, all of their items are then just left there. So people are coming across personal
supplies.
Yeah, but personal items, wallets, jewelry, clothing. One would assume probably some sentimental items maybe that you took with you. Like, so that's also like very creepy to me that, you can just come across items that somebody left there and potentially went deeper into the woods to do what they needed to do. It said that rescue workers and volunteers frequently come across these trails of string and tape. And like I said, sometimes they lead to a campsite, sometimes more ominously to a person, or just all of their personal belongings that were left behind by somebody who got to the end of the string, kept walking, and never came back. So I tried to do a little bit of research on, like, the string. Like, how long are we saying this string is? Like, how far does it go? So the length of the string or the tape trails found can vary significantly depending on how far someone ventured into the forest. But on average, these trails can range anywhere from a few meters to several hundred meters. And then it said some people tie the string close to the entrance while others let it stretch. Like, they go into the forest first and then let it stretch out from that point. In some cases, the string trails have been reported to be as long as 500 meters, which is about 1,600 feet.
Wow.
So that's pretty long.
Yeah.
The longer trails suggest that the individual might have spent considerable time exploring or contemplating before deciding whether or not to return. Volunteers and rescue workers have noted that following these trails often leads to very remote parts of the forest. And then, like I said, that's where they come across the campsites or the bodies.
Yeah.
So now I wanted to talk a little bit about more of the urban legend haunting, like, mythical, historical kind of things. So like I said, it is home to a lot of ghost stories, and they are largely influenced by Japanese folklore. The forest association with death is obviously inspiring a lot of ghost stories.
Right.
So there have been several reports of visitors to this forest that encounter unsettling or inexplicable things that they later will actually report to authorities. Most of these reports involve sightings of shadowy figures, eerie sounds, or just a general feeling of being followed. While the majority of these incidents are filed as anecdotal things, and sometimes they're also attributed to just the psychological effects of being in this forest. But, I mean, the fact remains that they still felt strongly enough to report it to the authorities in the first place.
Right.
Speaking of authorities and rescue workers have also reported hearing they've reported their own strange encounters, ranging from seeing mysterious people who vanish without a trace, maybe hearing disembodied voices calling out from the depths of the forest. And then, of course, as I had mentioned, they experienced compass malfunctions, electronic malfunctions, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, I mean, yes, people think it's because of the iron in the soil, but of course, before we were as technologically advanced,
right.
That would be a very easy thing to blame on ghosts and spirits.
Well, don't you think, the more that you're talking about all of this, and obviously there's high numbers of the deceased, it reminds me of a battlefield, which this is a battlefield of sorts. That energy has to go somewhere. I feel as if forests can be very spooky. They're uncertain kind of environments. Couple that with the energy of all of the deceased. There's no way the energy of these people, to some degree, is not still there. And I'm sure a lot of what people... and I do think the iron obviously plays a part, too. I don't think the iron isn't a factor with the different malfunctions. But I just think there's a lot going on there. But you know what I'm saying?
I do, absolutely. That's what I said about the Cecil Hotel.
Exactly. Same thing.
Yeah.
Right. You can't not expect there to be things, and I can't imagine that that's not fact when there is that much death.
I agree.
It's impossible. I'm serious. I said what I said.
You said it all right.
Right.
So yeah, I agree. I think that if a bunch of that sorrow and sadness and those acts, yes, they have to leave some kind of energetic stain.
Yeah.
So in terms of these spirits, like I said, there are things called the Uri, I think that's how they're pronounced. And they are central to many of the ghost stories surrounding this forest. So these spirits are the Japanese equivalent of what Western cultures would basically refer to as ghosts. But they do differ in a few ways. So the Uri are often said to be the souls of those who have died with unresolved emotions, typically something like sorrow, anger, or vengeance.
Builds that energy up.
Right. And in this forest, they are believed to be the spirits of the people who either have committed suicide or, like I said in those legends, were abandoned in the forest. According to folklore, these spirits linger in the forest, trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead, unable to move on because of their tragic fates, and visitors often report feeling unease or a very strong sense of just being watched, which they attribute to these spirits. And then there is something called the Jukai.
Okay.
So while the Uri are the most well-known spirits of the forest, there are also tales of more mysterious creatures that are said to inhabit the forest. These beings are rarely described in detail, and so a bunch is left to the imagination, but some of these legends speak of shadowy figures that move quickly through the trees, evading capture or clear sight, and others describe strange fleeting moments in the forest at the edge of one's vision, but vanish when they are approached. Then there are also stories of cursed objects. So hikers often come across strange personal objects in the forest. And like I said, I mean, yes, there are personal things that are left behind by the people who commit suicide, but I think they are, in this specific context, talking about things that, like, these objects look like they were left behind as part of some type of, like, ritual.
Oh.
So now I don't know if the person who did the ritual meant to commit suicide or not, but just kind of like
religious.
I don't know if it's
items?
religious, but like maybe candles and like dolls and like things that I feel like Western culture would consider like magic kind of stuff. It's just what I get. I don't know how common it is to come across that stuff, but like maybe even bones of like animals. I don't know, but I just think that's what I get when I read about what they are kind of like suggesting when they say cursed objects.
Right. May I stop you quickly?
Sure. It's been a while.
Thank you. Yes. Well, by quickly, I mean not quickly, of course.
Damn.
So when you were talking about the cursed objects, it made me think of movies. And one, and then that leads me into another, two of my favorites. And I feel like I don't recall talking to you about one of them. The other one I'm pretty sure you dislike. Cursed objects made me think of Stigmata.
Never saw it.
That's what I thought. I love that movie. Oh my God, I love that movie. And it's not necessarily like a Halloween movie, but in my eyes, it's in my category of movies I like to watch in this season. So I'll be watching it soon. In it, a rosary is cursed, basically.
Okay.
Possessed, if you will. And then whenever I think of Stigmata, I think of The Exorcist. That's what I thought. Yeah.
That's a scary movie.
God, I love that movie. That is one of my comfort ones.
Get out of here.
Comfort in the way that Jaws is comforting.
I was just going to say, yeah, you have your idea of cozy movie days are Jaws and freaking The Exorcist.
No, I love You've Got Mail. I love Mystic Pizza. Nice. I love Twister. Jurassic Park, the original, those are all Steel Magnolias. Come on now. But yes, there are the disturbing comfort ones as well.
Yeah, they're disturbing.
Right. So you have seen
I've seen it.
Right. And I mean, but it's been years. Like it's
been years, and I think it's gross, and it freaks me out, and I don't go for it. I've never been one for possession.
Right. I didn't think so.
Like where ghosts are, they just don't interest me as much. Possession, I just don't go for it. It freaks me out. I don't.
Well, if it freaks you out, then you believe in it, correct? Right? Show me.
I don't like the concept of it, whether or not I think it's actually happening. I mean, do you have a personal story to share or something? You're looking at me like you're going to say, well, in the summer of 96, I actually was possessed.
No, I don't have a story.
Okay, well, I was in Canada for Boxing Day. I actually was possessed.
Yet I still can't keep which holiday that is straight. Gosh, embarrassing.
Although, I will say this, one of my friends, he is from Colombia.
The country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the district. Yes. Or the clothing store. Yes, the country.
Right.
And this was years ago, but I was at the beach with a bunch of these people.
Okay.
And we were going around the table asking questions to the group, and my question was, has anybody had a supernatural experience?
Good question in a group, yes.
That they couldn't explain or whatever. And he was telling this story about, now it's been so many years, but it was basically, I think it was like his cousin, and he said something was not right with her for like days and days.
Oh
and
my gosh.
He said that, she started speaking in
tongues.
Not in tongues, in a voice that wasn't hers. And I guess they had to like rush her somewhere, and forgive me, I don't know where they took her, but wherever they took her, things were sorted out. But the way he was telling the story was like it wasn't like, he wasn't like, he would have never told the story had I not asked. It wasn't like he had lists, like he was waiting to pull it out like that evening,
And he wasn't like laughing about it.
No.
Holy.
So it
moly.
It was like, I mean, that's what I think of when I think of possession.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's heavy. That's a real story.
Well, it's as real as he said it to me. I can't say.
Well, yikes.
I don't know why he'd lie, but who knows?
Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing. All right, I guess that's all I had to say about possession. But now I sort of want to do an episode on it. I hope I do it justice if I do it.
Don't we all?
Right.
But speaking of what you had brought up about the energy, some of the researchers who study this forest believe that powerful emotions tied to the forest, like sadness, fear, and anger, create this spiritual energy.
Absolutely.
That continues to fuel the paranormal phenomena. And I know that on some of these documentaries, people have talked about how it's sort of like people who come from all over the world to do this act, not just to go hiking, but to do this act. It's almost like they contribute it to like a moth to a flame, if you will. Like this forest generates this kind of energy that reaches out to people who feel sorrowful and hopeless and stuff. And it's kind of like
a pull.
Right. And then it's like it's almost like it's ever feeding itself, because if that kind of energy is created by those type of acts and you keep drawing in those type of acts, it's just like this battery that never stops. I don't know.
Right.
So I wanted to talk just a little bit about the actual people who work there and who are in charge of finding these bodies and whatnot. So this forest, first and foremost, is known for its beauty, and just, that is a draw in itself. But obviously the reality is that some people enter there with no intention of leaving. So local authorities, along with some of these very dedicated volunteers, routinely patrol the forest to search for both those in need of help and also the remains of those who have tragically already taken their own lives. So as you can imagine, this work is emotionally taxing, but it's vital for both rescue efforts and body recovery. So shout out to those people, the workers, but then the volunteers.
Oh, I know.
Wow. That's
the emotional toll that has to be taken, and so multifaceted. I was even thinking, ever since you brought up about the cars in the parking lot, like, I'm sure there's not at all to like sound callous, but that helps. Like if you're seeing a car that's getting covered in all of this plant matter that's not moving, I assume people are sort of assigned to kind of keep eyes on that parking lot and take note and sort of really keep track of what vehicles are not leaving. And that would make it a little bit easier to, especially if like then the family reports that person missing, we have the car there. I feel like that sort of would solve some of these mysteries, disappearances. But awful. Like no matter what your duty is as a volunteer or an employee, just every day, not necessarily, I hope every day, but that's what your purpose is and what you're there for and what you're absolutely going to be finding time and time again.
So I looked a little bit into what are like the daily, what's a daily routine for these people? So local police, firefighters, and volunteers often conduct patrols through the forest, especially in those high-risk areas where people are most likely to wander off the trail.
Sorry.
Yes, that's all right.
Which I think is great as a potential...
You approve of it. They can rest easy. But Talia approves.
Which goes along with that deterrent concept that I touched on earlier.
Right.
All right. I'm done now.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. So, like I said, these patrols are not just for recovery, but also for intervention, offering help to those contemplating suicide. The signs that are placed at the entrance, they have messages like "Your life is a precious gift." Those are meant to encourage reconsideration of what these people might be going there to do. Each year, particularly during and after March, which is interesting because March in Japan marks the end of the Japanese fiscal year. So that is sadly peak time for suicides. There are organized search parties that comb through the forest. So these searches are a very grim routine because they often result in the discovery of remains and sometimes advanced stages of bodies in decomposition. And these, because we talked about how weird the ground is, sometimes these bodies are hidden under like thick vegetation or rocks, or sometimes because there's not just ice caves, but there's normal caves also. So sometimes these bodies are literally in caves.
Which I would think the individuals who go into the caves, I mean, I would imagine that's the majority of who aren't recovered.
I'm not sure, but
yeah.
I mean, they're checking them, so that's nice.
Well, true, but I wonder depth. I wonder so many different factors.
But the other thing, I feel like those can't be the people who hang themselves.
Exactly.
Because what would you hang yourself on in a cave?
Exactly.
Some reports from volunteers and authorities speak of eerie encounters during these patrols. And then it just, again, it talks about how they find these makeshift camps, these scattered belongings, personal items left behind. Volunteers have continued to share their stories with one another of seeing weird figures in the forests. So it's just, it's just a very grim kind of day, whether it's a typical day of just being a volunteer or when they all get together in March to do this.
Well, right. I mean, even how you were saying that they just go for these routine, what did you call it?
Searches?
Yeah, I guess like the search party.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm assuming they aren't always necessarily finding a body every day. I'm sure there are some days they find more than one. And even that, the mentality of like knowing just what these people are facing every day by choice, total heroes going out there and doing such just something that impacts so many, but that that's your purpose. That's most likely what you're going to be facing. How grim and just a lot. Just very heavy.
Yes.
Like a load to carry. Not to say a load to carry, but that's just a lot.
Well, oddly, my next point was talking about their emotional strain.
Yeah.
So for the volunteers and the rescue workers, the emotional toll of this repeatedly discovering bodies. Now, wait, one thing I wanted to say quick about what you just said was, when you think about it, even if we took the reports at their word from 2010, where like, let's say we took it at the biggest number reported, which would be 100, that is still like 265 days out of a year that you go and find nothing then. Do you know what I mean?
True.
So when you think about it like that, say there's 20 volunteers, that might mean one person, one day for 100 times finds something. So when you think about it throughout the entire year, plus you're not the only person out there, you do come across these people a lot less
than it kind of seems.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, and that's at its highest amount.
Right.
So 50 people, which is on the lower end, but
yeah. And I'd imagine each year ebbs and flows. Like who knows what each year.
And I didn't look into this before you ask. I did not look into this, but I don't know what role COVID would have played on. Did people get a lot of people had lost their jobs and stuff around that time. So did that influence more people to do this? But again, COVID was when they were not releasing that information anyway about how many people did it. So I don't know. But back to the emotional strain, many report that they will also feel these feelings of helplessness, frustration, and a deep sadness. And some volunteers become so affected that they have to take breaks or just discontinue their participation altogether.
Yeah. Oh, the burnout must be insane.
Right. The forest's oppressive silence coupled with the knowledge of, what they might come across creates an environment that is very difficult to endure for long stretches. But then we have also the personal motivation. So many of these volunteers are driven by a sense of duty to help those in need, sort of like what you talked about before, or just to bring closure to the families that they've left behind. So some volunteers are just local residents, while other people are people who have experienced loss, whether it was suicidal loss of somebody they loved or something like that, and they just feel compelled to contribute.
Right.
Then I looked into a little bit of like what role do authorities and technology play in this. So the police in Japan are actively involved in patrolling the forest. They have developed a bunch of standard procedures for handling situations where someone is found alive but suicidal. So officers and mental health workers, accompany police on these searches.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. So the mental health workers who are out there with the police, they're trained to offer immediate support, which I guess actually is what we were talking about. They're just not located in a building. They go out with the police.
Right.
And attempt to talk the person out of their decision. Unfortunately, when they are not able to prevent a death, though, the work shifts to recovery from prevention. So, the police are out there, I guess their primary goal is prevention, but of course, if that's not the case, then they still have to clean up what is happening. So, and then in terms of technological assistance, over the years, efforts have been made to help to locate those in distress. So they started using drones and heat sensing devices to help locate individuals in remote or dense parts of the forest. However, because the forest canopy is so thick, technology alone rarely is enough to actually find them. So many searchers still rely on physical ground patrols, which can take time, especially when searching for those who are trying not to be found. I mean, it's one thing if you're leaving a literal trail of string, but if you're not, then
like a needle in a haystack.
So when we talk about these people, in the morning, there's like a briefing that happens with the volunteers and stuff, just talking about, I'm thinking like the safety protocols and stuff and what to do if you find someone. Then they equip either the workers or the volunteers. So they give them things like maps, radios, GPS devices, which is sort of ironic because they're famously not known to work, but I guess be as safe as you can. They may also bring supplies like first aid kits, blankets, and counseling resources in case they do encounter someone contemplating suicide.
Right.
Searchers are trained to look at things like abandoned vehicles near the forest entrance just to see like what the odds are that there might be somebody in there. Because, I mean, the thing is, like we had said, not all of these people going there are from the area. So they might not be arriving by car. They might be arriving by bus.
Yes.
Or,
and then having
something.
no vehicle there. And
right. So then what exactly would happen if they came across somebody who was not dead, but just contemplating it? When a patroller finds someone alive but in distress, their primary goal is intervention. Volunteers and workers are trained to talk to these individuals, offering support and urging them to reconsider their decision. These interactions can be emotional and difficult, as patrollers often deal with individuals in deep mental anguish. So they provide resources. They provide water, blankets, phone numbers for mental health services, and in some cases, they escort the individual back to safety or call in for additional assistance. I feel like that must be it's sad, but I feel like that also must be a pretty good feeling if you actually physically escort someone back out of the forest instead of just being like, here's all this stuff, because they can say whatever they want, right? Like the person thinking about it, they could just go along with it to be like, all right, like buzz off.
Right.
But the idea of like you actually helping them to like whatever, pack up their stuff and get them back out into civilization, I feel like that to me feels like the top of like intervention where you've delivered them back to safety for at least the time being.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, but unfortunately, there are other things like discovering people who have killed themselves. So when the patrols come across this, the recovery can be both physically and emotionally taxing, as they have to carefully document and handle the remains for retrieval. And sometimes you can't just take the remains out right away, so you have to also mark the locations of where these people have been found so that people then can come in later who actually specialize in body recovery / removal.
Right.
To get rid of it.
Right. Well, and I'm assuming too, unless it's a very obvious way of death, autopsies would need to be completed, I would think, to see what the manner of death was.
And I only saw a reference to this like one place, and I didn't really look into it just because I knew this was going to be a very lengthy episode, and it has not disappointed. But I saw like this was mentioned about how the question was being asked, like, do people dump bodies there purposely, thinking, good,
I didn't think of that.
So, but I don't have the stats on that.
Fine. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I guess that would be semi-smart of the killers. I don't know.
I didn't think of that.
And then just basically to end, I just have 2 little facts.
2 or 3?
Well, just 2 right now.
Fine.
And it's one thing that you mentioned in the very beginning of this. This forest is second in the world in terms of like a popular place to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Now, do you know where the first place is?
The Golden Gate Bridge.
You got it, sister.
In the world.
In the world.
Holy moly.
So it only places second behind the Golden Gate Bridge.
Whew.
And the last little fact about this forest is that the lava rock floor that the forest is made of is very porous.
Oh.
And thus it absorbs a lot more sound than a regular forest, which is why people claim it's so eerily silent.
Also, may I
I don't think I could stop you if I wanted to. So you don't really have to ask your permission, just say it.
Don't you think there's something to be said about a porous ground?
I'm waiting. What is there to be said about a porous ground?
Absorbing the negative energy and holding it. Okay. Don't you think maybe, perhaps?
Perhaps.
I don't know.
Things are seeping in there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't know either. But, I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that necessarily. But, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's Japan's suicide forest, a beautiful but extremely sorrow-filled forest.
Yeah. Well, good job.
Thank you.
Very well done.
But like you said, it is certainly a heavy topic.
Oh, for sure. It has such a bleak vibe. I mean, I think you did a great job, too, touching on it is still a beautiful place for people to go explore and enjoy and, wonderful opportunity for gorgeous hiking. If you happen to be in Japan. But
right.
I just feel like so heavy. There is just a lot happening there.
Did I not mention anything that because you said you were aware of it, did I not mention something that you felt you need to mention before we wrap up?
Oh. About?
The forest?
Oh, no. You
Fine.
touched.
Well, you said, you've been fascinated with it, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know if there was something that you specifically were fascinated about that I didn't say, but not a trick question. Just wondering.
I didn't know enough about it, to have anything. I learned way more today than I did. Well, and again, the last time that I did a deep dive on it was years and years ago. So it's been so long. But it makes me want to go on a deep visual dive now of just getting in there and seeing some photos of how dense it is, how beautiful. I distinctly remember the pictures that when I had Googled it initially, it does have a dark sort of mystical vibe, but it just was so beautiful, I thought. I don't think it necessarily gave off like an unsettling vibe.
No. I mean, the videos I've seen at night.
Oh.
But I feel like that would be any forest.
Agreed. Agreed.
But yeah, I mean, some of those videos those are eerie. And these YouTubers who decide to go by themselves and just stay there,
nope.
Absolutely insane.
No. I feel like being in the woods at night in the dark and having yes, you obviously adjust to the darkness eventually, but you're not in your living room in the dark. You're in an area that's so unpredictable naturally between wildlife, not knowing if a tree's going to pop up. Like, you're just not familiar. And then add in this extra.
The fact that random spirits could be next to you or bodies. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, It could get pretty dicey, one would imagine.
Right.
So
I would not be going.
So before ending, I just want to give the suicide prevention line plus just kind of the crisis line that you can call and also text. And the number is simply 988. So it says here, if you need to talk, the 988 lifeline is here. So you have the ability to both call and text. And actually, I think if you go to 988lifeline.org, you actually have the ability to chat with somebody. And apparently they also have the option of American Sign Language as well.
That's incredible.
So I know, Talia, you don't have anything to say at the end. You never do. I think I've said quite a bit.
You have.
So, to end on a nice note, again, happy first day of autumn, everyone.
Yes.
And as always,
stay safe.
And stay chill.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You've just listened to Chillworthy. Thank you for joining us on this latest episode. While we strive to keep our discussions engaging and lighthearted, we also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the real lives and events that are at the heart of these stories.
We try to approach each topic with a sense of curiosity and respect, fully aware of the impact these events have had on the individuals and their loved ones. Our goal is to honor their memories by keeping their stories alive and shedding light on the mysteries that surround them.
If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and don't forget to join us on the next episode of Chillworthy.